so this is, we can say, a part two to the previous videos, but it's also a follow-up to a comment I got there, which was a comment I'd frankly been predicting. In the last video, I'd been quite critical of the nature of this commemoration parade in Beijing, because I believe it is being used for political purposes by the administration of Xi Jinping. I think that's quite obvious. Um, So I'd like to add a little bit to that, which I didn't mention in the previous video. Um, and I would also like to touch on some of the things this guy said. Assume it's a guy. It may have been a girl, but I assume it's a guy. Because I think there's going to be similar comments coming out, and I'm going to kind of rather than replying to each individual comment, I'd like to respond to them here. First of all, I don't know why it is, but when I make videos on this subject, very often the response from Chinese nationalists is to lecture me about American wrongs. Um, the obvious assumption here is that I'm an American. I'm not American, I'm British, okay? And they're two different countries. The United Kingdom and the United States are not the same country. Um, yes, it's true that we can be close politically. Yes, it's true we speak the same language, but we're different countries. And there's many aspects that are different, and we often have disagreements on numerous issues. So if you're going to respond to my video, at least do me the service of getting my nationality right. I think it's quite obvious that I'm not American, but in case of any doubt, I'm not. I'm British, okay? But even if I was American, trying to turn the focus on wrongs of my country or what you perceive to be my country, just it just shows to me you're trying to change the subject. If I was American, I'd be completely honest about America's past, and as a Briton, I'm completely honest about our past. I'm very objective, um, and I'm fully aware of the many bad things that this country has done. In fact, if you look at my video history, I have been very consistent in my critique um, of immoral policies. And I mean, for example, right now I'm very critical of the role that Britain's taken in the European migrant crisis. But I'm not going to let this video be dominated by trying to defend my own position. I don't need to do that because my video history shows that. No, I want to address the sort of arrogant nationalism that I've been seeing and kind of premeditate some of those comments from Chinese nationalists. I don't like to brand people, but I can't think of any other way to describe them because they're being very nationalistic and they're being very defensive. I refuse to sort of consider that these people represent all Chinese. I don't think they do. Um, but I'd like to address a few of those points. It kind of irritates me because this guy blatantly didn't listen to the video. He had this post about all those elderly farmers in China who still remember Japanese aggression and this sort of thing. And this is just the sort of thing I predicted, like a sort of lecture about what the Japanese done wrong. I don't need to hear that, okay? Because I'm well aware of Japan's wartime guilt, okay? My country was also at war with Japan, and although we didn't suffer the same way that China did, British soldiers, were on the Bataan Death March, or the Burma Railroad at least. So, we have some concept of what Japan done. Again, I'm not saying it's comparable to what China went through at the hands of Imperial Japan, but believe me, there's no love loss in this country for what Imperial Japan done. I'm talking about Imperial Japan, not Japan today. So, coming out with statements like, oh, elderly Chinese remember and so on, I don't know what you're trying to prove because I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing what Japan done. That is not the point of this video or the last video. But I would add something to that. There's also elderly Chinese who remember the Great Leap Forward and the millions who starved to death under Maoist policies. But unlike those who suffered under Japan, they're not allowed to vent their anger and their frustration at what the regime done, the Chinese regime. Um, and basically what it comes down to is utter hypocrisy. And this is something I found very, very frustrating from the Chinese side. Um, the problem is anyone who kind of mentions this and happens to be an outsider, the immediate response is always that it's one of defensiveness. And this is understandable. I guess most people are defensive about their country. But Chinese YouTube users need to be more objective and stop constantly making excuses for the Communist Party. I frankly get a bit tired of it because I see this all the time. Instead of just recognizing some of the things that critics are talking about, all they do is get defensive and want to defend the party. It frankly gets nauseating. And outside China, we constantly hear about China's peaceful rise. Now, I don't believe that China wants to go to war tomorrow. I don't believe that. But at the same time, I believe it sends out a mixed message by having a massive military parade and then saying, unleashing doves at the end is some sort of tokenism, which is all it is, really. Um, that's mixed messages. You can't preach about peace whilst having a massive military parade. Clearly, that parade was intended to show China's military might. It was muscle flexing. That's what it was. Because a lot of the weapons being on display were not from World War II. They were nothing to do with World War II. These are modern weapons, clearly designed to show China's military might. Now, of course, China is not the only country that does this. The United States shows off its muscles as well. So does Russia. So does the UK. Every country does it. But the problem I have with this is the double standards of preaching about peace whilst doing it. That's just, no one's going to believe that except the very naive or those who are kowtowing to Beijing. Um, the point about my videos is not to defend the United States, and I don't really understand why Chinese nationals seem to think, like, they come out with comments like, "Oh, look at what America done to the Native Indians, the Native Americans." I'm well aware of that. Although, whilst we're on that point, it's not quite as black and white as European settlers just went in and killed all the natives. It's a lot more complex than that. And I think I'll make another video about that. But my point is that every country has a past. That is true, but not every country has censorship the way China does. In the United States, and I will say this, this isn't about defending America, but it's just a statement of fact. In the United States, you can go into a library or go onto the internet and do research on America's very dubious past. In the UK, you could do exactly the same thing. As a British citizen, I can go to a British library and read about the Amritsar massacre in India when British imperial troops opened fire. Now, I challenge you, Chinese nationalists, to tell me that you can do the same thing with the Communist Party. And I'll tell you, the answer is no, you can't. So the fundamental bottom line is this: China is not a country that is honest about its past. It's just not. And if you find that offensive, well, I'm sorry. I'm not making these videos to try and be provocative. I'm saying it because I think that it needs to be said. I'm saying it because I think Beijing is using this as a political stunt, and people need to challenge that. Um, it's Chinese arrogance cannot go unchecked, and especially under the Xi administration, we've been seeing a lot of arrogance, and frankly, the rest of the world's getting a little bit tired of it. And not just Western countries, other Asian countries as well. I've spoken to Filipinos and Vietnamese who are also tired of Chinese arrogance. And I'm saying this as someone who likes China, the country, very much, but I've no time for the Chinese government. Um, and I don't have much time for people who go out of the way to constantly make excuses. If you're Chinese and you're willing to be objective, you're willing to recognize China's past, then I'm going to listen to you and I'll be prepared to hear what you have to say. But if you're going to come onto my video and just say things like, "Oh, look at all the bad things Japan done, and look at how perfect China is and how peaceful China is," as far as I'm concerned, you're just promoting propaganda. Um, and you're really not proving anything, except that you're being either very naive or very stubborn. Um, I'm not making these videos to provoke. That is not the intention, whatever you think. You know, I'd much rather have a situation where there could be a sort of understanding and mutual respect. But right now, China, especially under Xi Jinping, is really showing profound arrogance. That's how it's coming across to the rest of the world because it's not showing any, you know, what it's just utterly hypocritical to talk about Japan not confronting its past, whilst China itself doesn't confront its past because it doesn't. I'm telling you now, you cannot openly discuss the Great Leap Forward or the Cultural Revolution in China. You can't do that. So it's time for China to be honest and start admitting its own past because constantly demonizing the Japanese isn't going to win international favors. Most of the world accepts what Japan done, and even most Japanese do. So it's time to stop pointing fingers and time to stop sort of using this as a political tool and just start moving forward. I'm not saying forget what happened. I'm not saying that for a second. And I'm well aware that there's still many Chinese who are veterans from that era. I'm not saying overlook the suffering they went through. I'm not saying forget what Japan done. What I am saying is stop being such hypocrites because the rest of the world can see through this. And it isn't just Western countries, it's other Asian countries as well. You know, this isn't about East versus West because the Philippines, Vietnam, and other Asian countries also believe that China is using this as a political tool. I mean, today, if you ask someone in the Philippines or Vietnam, which country do they see as the biggest threat, they're not going to say Japan, they're going to say China. And I'm not saying that to be provocative, I'm saying it because it's a fact. Um, they see China as throwing its weight around, as playing the regional bully, and China isn't frankly doing very much to dissuade this concern. I mean, for example, this naval exclusion zone, that is clearly provocative. Um, so we'll leave it there. Interpret this video however you want. If you want to, you know, say that I'm just, I'm a apologist for the CIA or something, that's complete rubbish. But if that's what you want to believe, whatever. Um, I'm just talking about facts here. And the fact of the matter is, China does not admit its own past. So if it's going to preach about learning the lessons from history, then start with, you know, your own past. And one other thing, I will allow comments here because I believe in free expression, but I will ask that you directly answer my question. And the question is this: why does the Chinese Communist Party continue to hide its own history? Answer that question, and then I might answer yours, although I believe I already have.